So good morning. I'm Clarke Englund. I'm the adult Bible teacher for the Sunday school class at New Braunfels Bible Church. And we are studying the book of Isaiah. And I'd like to thank Eric Brucas for filling in for me for chapters 58 and 59. So we'll go through chapter 58, then we'll come back and do chapter 59. So first, let me start by reading chapter 58 from the New Living Translation. And it says, "Shout with the voice of a trumpet blast. Shout aloud, don't be timid. Tell my people Israel of their sins, yet they act so pious. They come to the temple every day and seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a righteous nation that would never abandon the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want me to be near. We have fasted before you, they say. Why aren't you impressed? We have been very hard on ourselves, and you don't even notice it. I will tell you why," I responded. "It's because you are fasting to please yourselves. Even while you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. What good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarreling? This kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with me. You humble yourselves by going through the motions of penance, bowing your heads like reeds bending in the wind. You dress in burlap and cover yourselves with ashes. Is this what you call fasting? Do you really think this will please the Lord? No, this is the kind of fasting I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free and remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them and do not hide from relatives who need your help. Then yourself from behind. Then when you call, the Lord will answer. Yes, I am here, he will quickly reply. Remove the heavy yoke of oppression. Stop pointing your finger and spreading vicious rumors. Feed the hungry and help those in trouble. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as the noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you dry, restoring your strength. It will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your cities. Then you will be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't pursue your own interests on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath and speak of it with delight as the Lord's holy day. Honor the Sabbath in everything you do on that day, and don't follow your own desires or talk idly. Then the Lord will be your delight. I will give you great honor and satisfy you with the inheritance I promised to your ancestor Jacob. I, the Lord, have spoken." And so as we go in, we see chapter 58 is in the Isaiah is writing to the people, and this gives us the timeline. It brings us back to ground us to where we're at. You know, we see the Syrian assault on Jerusalem in 701, the captives, including Daniel, taken to Babylon. Babylon demolished Jerusalem, and then Cyrus decrees the return, and the temple rebuild completed back, and then in 445 BC, the wall is completed. You know, this is chapters 1 through 9 was more on the pre-exile and the people's inability to live righteously. Chapters 40 to 55 is focus on the time in exile with the focus on God and his righteousness and his ability to deliver them. You know, he pointed out their sin and their inability and their need for him in the first 39 chapters. And then he pointed out how he was going to deal with them being in exile and restoring them from exile and providing the Redeemer, his servant, in the climax of that in chapter 53. In chapters 56 through 66, this is, again, this is after the return from exile, and what is he expecting from these people that he's redeemed? We saw that he has no respecter of persons, the foreigners and the eunuchs in chapter 56. Those who keep the Sabbath, he will honor, and those who worship him. But he called the leaders blind because they were not worshiping him. And yet the foreigners and the eunuchs were the example of how to worship. And in chapter 57, there is no concern for the elderly, and they were trusting their idols. They were not trusting God. So we see in the first couple verses, you know, what is Isaiah being called to do, and what issue is he called to address? Well, he's called throughout the whole book to speak loudly of Israel's sin and their rebellion. And he's pointed out their sin time and time again, and so much so that the kings have literally imprisoned him at times. And they obsessed with temple worship, and they'd forgotten God's commands. The sin question was really the critical issue, not the public worship. They said, Lord, we're fasting and we're worshiping and we're doing all these hard things for you, but you're not paying attention to us. And because they weren't doing it to truly worship, they're doing it to manipulate him. And that's what God goes on in verses 3-5. He says, you're trying to manipulate me. You want me to act in your favor. You want me to provide for you because you're doing things that you think I like. You're trying to show me how devoted, but you're oppressing the poor. You're hurting those that you should be caring for. And so, as it says there, they're trying to gain favor with God without really addressing their sin problem. And their religious activity was just a matter of making them feel good as they go about trying to manipulate God. And they're doing exactly what the pagans all around had been doing for years and years. And that was the example they were following is, well, if we show our devotion to God, we can manipulate him into doing what we want him to do. What is the question here is if ritual fasting was simply boosting one's religious ego, what's really the key to divine blessing? And it's really overcoming injustice with righteous acts. So you loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke and set the oppressed free, break every yoke. You see these phrases throughout this section and through these two verses here, and he's calling them to quit oppressing the poor and oppressing the servants that are serving them. Instead of doing this fasting, he wants them to treat people with respect and treat people fairly, and God's people are dedicated to providing the basic needs of life to those who do not own them. They're supposed to be feeding the hungry and sheltering the poor and clothing those who need it and taking care of your own flesh. And we see Jesus in Matthew says the same kind of thing, why should I let you enter my kingdom? And they said, you didn't feed the hungry, you didn't shelter the poor, you didn't provide clothes. And he cast those out who didn't do those things. And yet, for those that were doing those, he let them in. Not a clean example, but it's, we see this. He's looking for them to be dedicated to those around them and not to be self-centering and self-serving. The call to the people here is, what is their mission? They're supposed to be the example, the light to the world. Their salvation was to be not just for them, but to all those around. They were supposed to lead in worship. They were the only ones who really, truly knew who God was, but they were approaching him in all the wrong ways. God is present for his people at all times. And, he wants his people to present him to them. Same goes for us today. We should be doing the same kind of things. And we're, as Christians, are to be the light in the world and presenting the good news of Jesus Christ, presenting the gospel of the creator of the universe and how he's provided a means to come to him. Other scriptures, Psalm 119, describing the righteous, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever, his horn will be exalted with honor. And then we see in Acts 10, Cornelius the centurion, he is characterized as a righteous and a just man, one who fears God, who gives to the poor, who gives to the temple, and he does everything in his power to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. And that's what God is looking for Israel to do as a means of sharing his grace and his glory to the world around them. You know, what does he promise them? Well, that he will listen to their prayers. He will guide them. He will strengthen them. And he will provide them the opportunity to rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple so that they can come, so that they can worship, and that they can glorify God, and all those around will see that. And, you know, what does he want them to do in respect to the Sabbath? Well, he wants them to stop doing as they've been doing. They have not kept the Sabbath. They have, worked on the Sabbath, and they have despised others and oppressed them on the Sabbath, such that forcing them to do things that they cannot do for themselves. But there's no joy, there's no respect, there's no kindness in how they're treating others in any way, shape, or form. He says, stop engaging in commerce. The selling in the outer courts at the temple, and selling even in the inner courts at the temple. You know, they aren't supposed to be doing that on the Sabbath, and yet that's exactly what they're doing. Is they're selling the turtle doves, and selling the lambs for offering and sacrifice, and yet that is not what they are allowed and should be doing on the Sabbath. They should be delighting in the Lord and enjoying his blessing, enjoying the time spent with him during this day when it's a day of rest and it's a day to focus on God. And so we have the same encouragement for us today when we go back and look. When you look at the application for us today, it's the same thing. We are tempted to use religious behavior to manipulate God. You know, there are people that still fast today. People use church attendance. People have daily devotions and prayer, tithing, and if they, for those that attend church, they look down at those that skip church. For those that do daily devotions, they look down at those that are not having time in God's word every day and time in prayer. For those that tithe, they look around, who's putting money in the offering plate. But they're also doing this as a way of, God, see how religious I am? See how devoted to you I am? I come to church every time the doors are open. I read your word. I pray. I give you my money. And we're expecting God to bless us and take care of us just because we're doing those things. And we're doing it with the wrong heart. It should be about serving him and serving those around us, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ today, such that instead of beating people up because they don't worship in the same way we do, but they should be worshiping Jesus. And it's not the how, it's the who. If we should be mirroring God. It says blessing is a natural and abundant byproduct of serving God and not doing it for manipulative reasons, but doing it because we love him. He wants a relationship with us, and that's what he requires and asks of us, is for us to love him back. And when we serve him, we do it out of love, not because we want to gain blessing and favor, not because we want to manipulate him, but we do it because we love him. And we see that over and over again in the New Testament. And this kind of sums it up here. True fasting and worship is seeking justice and compassion for the needy. Righteous living on the behalf of the needy brings a relationship where God hears and responds to our prayer. And, religion being defined as combination of proper conduct and relationship to the world's needy and proper respect for the worship observance which God had set forth. He really wants relationship with us. He doesn't want us to do things out of habit, out of a form of manipulation, out of a form of just religious activity to gain favor. He wants us to do things for him because we love him. He wants us to do things to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And that's what he's called us to do. And so regardless of what our background is. If we are a believer in Jesus Christ, he's calling us to be a light in the world and to serve him and to worship him and to bring that to those around us, and showing off our religiosity is not what he's asking us to do. He's calling us to a relationship with him and a heart for those around us. So thanks for listening today. Hope you can join us in person. We meet Sunday mornings at 8:30. Again, thank you, Eric, for preparing this lesson on Isaiah chapter 58.